All right, so one last video before I turn in for today, and I wanted to do a video here that people have been requesting of me, which is along the lines of, okay, so predictions video of where you think everybody finishes in the division. Yeah, I don't have any idea, and I mean I did the season previews for each team, and I said for each team in the season preview where I thought they would finish in the division, but it's tough. And what I've done here is I've just put up in whatever order. This is not true to how I had them finishing in the divisions, and I just put them in an order that I thought, yeah, that I guess that looks sure, fine, whatever. All right, okay, sure. Because honestly, this division setup means things have changed. So you're only playing against teams in your division, that changes things. Also, the amount of time in between last season and this season is dramatically increased over a regular season. And think about it. You have a season that finishes in early April. The next season starts in October. We usually see, out of 16 teams made the playoffs the year before, we might see 10 of them make the playoffs the year after. Now we've got a longer off season. We've got a completely different setup now for how the schedule is going to work. It's a compressed schedule. And it feels like there was more player movement than in a normal offseason. And so I think this is the most difficult to predict season. Not only that, but these teams are just having scrimmages within themselves here, and then they're going to work, and the regular season starts on Wednesday with no preseason games whatsoever. We are flying blind as we've never seen. Usually late September, we have preseason games, and so we have some idea for what things are going to look like and which teams are going into the regular season looking good, which ones look like they need work, which ones have kids that are ready, which ones don't. So I'll go through this, but it's only just basics, just the basics, because again, once we start playing games on Wednesday, you can throw it all out. All the predictions can just go. Could Toronto miss the playoffs? Yes. Could Tampa miss the playoffs? It's highly unlikely. But again, if they struggle against these teams, let's just say Tampa struggles against Florida. That's eight matchups right there. That's 8 games. If they win 2 out of 8, that's a problem. For Vegas, the odds of them finishing out of the playoffs, very, very slim. But it's the same thing. It's if they struggle against California teams, it makes it more likely that could very well happen. So, going through the NHL teams, we'll start with the North here, and then we've got the Central, the West, and the East. So we'll just go through this and just very basic. For Toronto, they have to rediscover what they had going for them a couple years ago. I'd put Calgary in that category too. Calgary, though, it was more of the 2018-2019 vibe, and for Toronto, it's the 2017-2018 vibe. Both of these teams have not been able to get out of the blocks in the playoffs. Both Toronto and Calgary have the exact same issue. It's different, but it's the same issue. Both of them are going to have questions about their goaltending. Freddie Anderson, is he going to stay? Is he capable of getting back to his form of a couple years ago? Jacob Markstrom. Is Jacob Markstrom really that good of a goaltender, or did Vancouver's goaltending coaching make him look better than what he was? Both of them have those questions. They both have young forward groups that are seen as having a hard time getting over that hump in the playoffs. A lot of the criticisms of Johnny Gaudreau, you could see those same criticisms being thrown at Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner when it comes to the playoffs. These teams are in a very similar spot. The pressure's on both. They both perceive themselves to be Stanley Cup contenders. And as an article on, I think it was TSN today, said it's a curse and a blessing that all these Canadian teams are just against each other for Stanley Cup reasons. Meaning one of the final 4 teams in the playoffs will be Canadian. Whether or not they belong there is going to be a question. Now for Edmonton, Edmonton's problem isn't really they can't get out of the first round. For Edmonton, they weren't able to get past Chicago. It felt like Chicago's experience took over for them. For Edmonton, they need to show that they can get back to the playoffs in back-to-back years. Draisaitl needs to show he can do it again. And then there's some pieces they've added which should make them better. Edmonton, I could see, and I'll just move these around just to show that this isn't in any particular order. I could see that being the way things finish in the North. I could see the Oilers being the best team in the North. And again, it would probably come down to Koskinen and Smith being able to hold the fort, and Tyson Barrie would probably have to have a bounce back year for them. Play more like the Colorado Tyson Barrie and not like the one we saw in Toronto last year. For Montreal really it's a simple matter of I think it really comes down to Carey Price and the defense in front of him. And again, Montreal could very well be in the playoffs, but then you have another problem here. So let's just say these are your 4 Canadian teams in the playoffs. Both Vancouver and Winnipeg have playoff aspirations. Connor Hellebuck yesterday says, well, I've got a Vezina. The Vezina's great. I'd like to have a Stanley Cup. Kudos to him for saying it. And every player should have that same mentality. Vancouver fans, some of them are upset about the players that left, mostly to Calgary. Thanks, Flames. But the reality is, maybe I'll say that every time Josh Leivo scores a goal. Thanks, Calgary. It'll be the reverse of thanks, Toronto, for when he scored for Vancouver. But for Vancouver, the argument could be made that they improved things. That, yes, Tanev left, but you brought in Nate Schmidt. Schmidt's a better defenseman than Tanev. I'm not making that argument. I'm saying that's what the argument is that's out there. And it's hard to refute it. It is. The argument that, well, Toffoli leaves, but now we've got Höglander. Höglander has more upside than Toffoli. Hard to argue that that's not the case, since Toffoli is much older than Höglander. And the argument, too, that, well, Besser, as long as he can stay healthy, they're in good shape. You lose Markstrom, but you gain Holtby. Holtby has a cup ring. Markstrom doesn't have that. So the argument can be made of Holtby's experience combined with Demko making that rise in the playoffs. If that's the real Demko, the Canucks are in good shape. So then the argument can be, well, Vancouver can't finish out of the playoffs, to which Winnipeg fans can say, hey, they got Hellebuck, we've got the forward group that we have, we should score enough goals to make the playoffs. This is why when I talk about Canada, I talk about this being these 6, and then, oh yeah, Ottawa, who's added Stützle, they've added Matt Murray and net. They've been improving their depth and their veteran leadership in the offseason. Might be a team to watch. So Canada will be very interesting. Now we move over to the Central. You've got Tampa, who should win this division, right? Even though they've lost Kucherov for the year, Stamkos steps into that spot. They should be good for the year. Cirelli looks like he's getting better every year. Vasilevsky, I think he's the best goalie in the league. It's a debate we can have at another time, especially once the season gets started. It's kind of silly to have it right now. But Tampa Bay should be the leader. However, you could make the argument that Tampa ends up second behind Carolina. You can make that argument because Carolina has an excellent defense core. They have some very good scoring. They don't, at this point, have the kind of injury concerns as Tampa. Plus, Tampa has lost players from that Stanley Cup winning roster. And while you can look at that roster and say they haven't lost anything that they weren't able to lose, you can also make the argument of, yes, but this is not the roster that won the Stanley Cup right now. And this is a team that may have to make other moves at some point this season in order to shore things up. And Carolina looks like a more complete team. And they're a team that, you know, has been able to go through back-to-back years now where they look like a pretty good team. And it looks like they're building up towards some sort of sustained excellence. And then you have Columbus. You can't underestimate Columbus. And so for me, I may be overestimating Columbus by insisting they're going to be one of the top 3 teams in the Central. But you can make the argument that if Korpisalo and Merzlikins end up being able to replicate what they did this past season, Columbus is going to be in the mix for the top of that division too. And again, because Columbus doesn't have to worry about going out and playing in Canada or playing in California. The Central Division has some brutal travel too. But comparatively speaking, only the East, I believe, has less travel issues to deal with. The West and the North would be the ones that have the most trouble. So for Columbus, it's just a matter of going, okay, if we can beat Tampa, we can figure out Tampa. And if we can beat Florida, then every time we go to Florida, well, it ends up being 16 games during the season that you win those against those 2 teams. This is why it's going to be so hard to predict. I like Nashville's chances too. Because to me, Nashville, they've been on a downswing, but I think they're better than what they showed against Arizona in that play-in round, and hopefully that lights a bit of a fire under this team. Arvidsson should have a bounce-back season as long as he's able to stay healthy. Fingers crossed on that one. And I think Saros is a solid starter for them. The problem is this. Dallas. So for Dallas, they don't have Sagan. They don't have Bishop. True, that hurts. This was a team that was already struggling to score goals. But if Ottinger is worthy of the hype, if Ottinger's as good as he's supposed to be, and if he can back up for Hudobin, as long as they're able to keep this thing together until Bishop comes back, which is going to be a couple months into the season, you just don't know with Dallas. You don't know what's going to happen. And again, they were a Stanley Cup finalist with Hudobin, so it's possible that if they figure out Tampa, and this is again that thing, right, where if Dallas figures it out, Dallas could very well stay in the mix. Sagan comes back. Bishop comes back. Next thing you know, you've got Dallas in the playoffs. But Florida's overdue for a playoff appearance. Florida's got a very good team. They're paying a lot of money to that goaltender. They're paying a lot of money to that goaltender because Bobrovsky's pretty good. He had an off year. He could absolutely bounce back. So in the Central, the two teams that you can kind of look at as, for lack of a better term, and just say, well, we'll write them off, right? We'll write them off for playoffs. You have Chicago, who, due to the now mystery illness of Taves, the fact they don't have Kirby Dach for the season, that should submarine them right there, right? And then for Detroit, the odds of them going from a season where they couldn't win games at all to being a team that's in the playoffs, it's probably a bridge too far. And definitely if you're Detroit, you're looking at this season and going, we might be better off waiting until the 2021-2022 season before we really go for it. And then, in between now and then, we can get another top draft pick in what should be a pretty deep draft. It may end up being another defenseman, but I don't think Detroit would turn down a blue chipper if they won the draft lottery and got Owen Power. If they ended up with, Luke Hughes as an example, I don't think they'd be upset with that setup. And I think if they did get a top draft pick and they draft Luke Hughes, it might take some of the sting out for Detroit fans that wanted Quinn Hughes and didn't get him. So there's that. So these, again, this is three teams so far to two divisions I look at and say, probably not a playoff team. So in the West, you have Vegas, who the pressure is on at all times. Vegas is expected to be in the playoffs. Vegas is expected to be a contender. This is year 4. The only year they didn't have that pressure was year 1. But years 2, 3, and now 4, they have that pressure. And they've lived up to that pressure pretty well. So you have Vegas there. I like Vegas' chances right now of potentially winning that division. But you have Colorado, who you could very easily see Colorado finishing first in that division. But you also have St. Louis. So you have the Blues, who are the 2019 Stanley Cup champions, right? You have Colorado, who are odds-on favorites to win the 2021 Stanley Cup. You have Vegas, who have been one of the odds-on favorites to win the Stanley Cup in years 2, 3, and now 4 of their existence. Those are 3 Stanley Cup contenders. There's not a lot to choose between the 3. You look in net, you've got Leonard and Fleury. You've got Francouz and Grubauer, which I think is probably an underrated tandem. And then you've got Bennington and the unknown of Husso, who, while Husso has been impressive, Craig Berube is very happy with his play so far in training camp. We'll see when we get into regular season games, the games that really matter, how well suited he is to the NHL game. It may end up being a brilliant move, trading out Allen and bringing in Husso. So those are 3 teams right there where you've got former Stanley Cup and the other 2 teams that are considered Stanley Cup contenders. This should be your 3. However, there's no pressure on the Kings. And the Kings, for them to get here, it's simple. Their youth has to show up and has to be really good out of the gate. So Velarde has to show that the 7 points in 10 games, that he can project that out over a full season. So in 50 games, he can score 40, 45 points. He has to show that. Martin Ferk needs to show that he's able to do it over a full season as well. And then you need Turcotte to step in. You need some help on the blue line. You need a lot of young kids to come together. It is a tough bridge to cross for the LA Kings to get into the playoffs. So the most likely scenario is that it's Minnesota. But Minnesota's center spot, well, who's their number 1 center? Right, it could be Eriksson Ek. And Eriksson Ek in the NHL, I like him. I don't know that he's the number 1 center. If Johansson or Johansson, whatever name he's going by today, if Johansson ends up being on the wing, is that a fail then for Guerin? Or does that mean Rossi gets in? Like, there's a lot of question marks. So what's interesting to me is I feel like there's more question marks in the West than there are in other divisions. Now, Arizona, likely not going to be in the mix. And I say that because they had cap problems that prevented them from really getting better in the offseason. I know you have Kemper, and I know you have Ronta. I know the goaltending is really good. I know the defense is really good. But I still have the same question with Arizona, which is where are the goals coming from? And what kind of depth do they have up front? So that's my question mark really with Arizona. And I know Garland is an excellent player that has star written all over him, but I still wonder about, can Keller have that bounce back year? I hope he can, but he needs to. For San Jose fell off the map last year. Can they get back into this mix? There's a lot of questions about that. There's a lot of questions about their depth up front, and their goaltending is a giant question mark right now. And then you have the Ducks. The Ducks appear to be firmly planted in a rebuild. So what's interesting is there's 3 cup contenders in this division, and then it's just a complete wild card, really. In this division, you have, I would argue, Tampa still a cup contender, Carolina maybe borderline cup contender, and then you've got some really solid teams and a couple that are rebuilding. Coming back out to Canada, you've got 6. There's not one team out of the 6 that you look at and go, well, they're clearly a step ahead of everybody else. And then you've got Ottawa, who may be a spoiler. So we'll go out to the West, or into the East. I'm sorry, I'm used to going out to the West in the 31 players videos. Used to finishing with that division. We'll finish with the East in this one. So Philadelphia, it's a matter of having good back-to-back seasons, which they haven't had in a while. I think they have the manpower to do it. That's why I want to talk about them first. I think Carter Hart's the guy to do it for them. But they're going to have a challenge. Boston is not going to miss Marchand. Apparently he's going to be back right to start the season. And Pastrnak, it doesn't look like he's going to miss the amount of time that he was supposed to. So that's a huge difference for Boston, having those 2 guys in. Don't call it the perfection line, but it's going to be together early in February. That makes all the difference in the world for Boston. They may have to outscore their problems. The blue line is a little thin now with the losses they suffered in the offseason. Their goaltending's a year older. And while Rask was a Vezina nominated, number 2 overall in the Vezina voting goaltender, I don't know that he replicates that this year. And between he and Halak, they're both getting older. You have to think at some point that's going to bite him. The Islanders, you can't count out a team coached by Barry Trotz, especially when it comes to playoff contention. So for me, the Islanders should be a playoff team. But this is where the group of death thing really takes over. So let's just assume these 3 teams are in the playoffs. People watching this are going to say, I'm not assuming those 3 teams are in the playoffs because, all right, Capitals, always a strong team, Stanley Cup champion in 2018, should absolutely be in the playoffs. But Pittsburgh, Stanley Cup champions in 2016 and 2017, haven't missed the playoffs in a very long time. And so Pittsburgh fans are very likely to say, look, we think we can beat, insert name of any of these 4 teams on the board. They may look at Philly and say, we can beat Philly. We got a better lineup than Philly. We can beat Boston. We think we can beat. And again, you go through each team in the division. Then you have the Rangers, who by virtue of adding Lafreniere, their rebuild is done. Now they've got Shesterkin and Georgiev in net. And their blue line looks really solid as well. Again, much like the Kings out west, the Rangers are going to be relying on a lot of kids being able to take that next step. A guy like Kakko, for instance. But you've also got Panarin. There's no reason to think that the Rangers won't be in the mix. So what this leaves is Buffalo. I'm going to put Buffalo up here because I think Buffalo is going to be better than people might give them credit for. But the thing with Buffalo is going to be Ullmark. Ullmark needs to be able to maintain the kinds of numbers that we see out of Buffalo early in the season. Buffalo, the last 2 regular seasons, has been excellent through, mid-November? And then it just dies. They need to avoid that. If they can avoid that, there's no reason to think Buffalo won't make this division very, very, very difficult to predict. They've added a lot of players. If they all find chemistry with one another, if we see a situation where Stahl and Skinner get that chemistry and they get it going, there's no reason to think Buffalo couldn't be a dark horse to end up pushing one of these teams down in the division of death, which leaves you with New Jersey. And I don't like leaving New Jersey as the only team that I'm putting outside of this, Because to me, I really think New Jersey's made a lot of the right moves too. The news that Corey Crawford now has kind of walked away from the team for personal reasons, as troubling as that may be, there are still other goaltenders out there. Either they fix this from within with Wedgwood, or they can find somebody else from the outside, and there are teams that will have guys available. To me, New Jersey is still a step or two behind other teams in that division. But the blue line looks all right. Their forward group looks okay. They need to sign Bratt. But again, this to me is the division of death. This year is going to be very, very difficult to predict, because I know right now, before I post this video, there will be people who look at these teams down here and say, wait, don't you dare write off insert name of one of these teams here. The most unpredictable season, I think, ever. Because of the amount of time in between seasons, because of the turnover, and because we're looking at a completely different schedule than we've ever seen. Getting off to a fast start is so important. Those first 10 games are so important. In any other regular season, you can go, well, we have 72 left. Now, yeah, you have 46 left after those first 10 games, and if you played poorly, the problem is all of them were against divisional rivals. You can't look at a game and go, well, we lost a point, but we have to make sure that, we got that point tonight in overtime, and we better hope nobody in the division gets ahead of us. You just lost to a division rival. You will lose ground every single game you lose. So it is a unique situation. The teams that handle that stress the best, likely to be the teams left standing. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and it is going to be one heck of a regular season. I'm looking forward to it. Fingers crossed that we get through it. Everything goes smoothly. We get a Stanley Cup winner near the beginning of July, and then we cruise into the 2021-2022 season with 32 teams in the league. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.